welcome back, Commonwealth, to another episode of the Bluegrass Soccercast, your home for all things soccer, right here in the beautiful Commonwealth of Kentucky. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. Jimmy. That's Mr. Jon. Jon, how are we doing today, sir?
Doing good, Jimmy. How are you?
Doing good, my friend. We have quite a packed show today. We have all things LouCity on this episode. Here in just a few moments, we'll be joined by Coach Danny Cruz of LouCity, and then we'll be going into a full breakdown of what you all can expect from this season with LouCity. And then we will, of course, kind of talk a little bit about what the match that Jon and I were at yesterday between Lexington and Louisville, but we also want to get Coach's thoughts on that as well. So, Jon, before we bring Coach on, any thoughts for the audience before we get into it? I know you just released the Lexington season preview. Any quick thoughts? And I want to hype that up before we jump in.
Not at this time. I can touch in at post interview.
You got it. Well, with all of that then out of the way, let's bring him on. He is the head coach of your LouCity Football Club, Mr. Danny Cruz. Coach, are you there? Oh no. Technical difficulties. 1 second. Jon, in the meantime, while we're getting Coach back on here, let's go on and kind of talk about what we saw yesterday with the. No, he might be back. Coach, if you can hear me, if you can hear this, give me a thumbs up. There we go. Okay, yeah. Now he's here. Hey, Coach Cruz, how are you?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Coach is playing under the weather a little bit tonight, so if you see him, wipe his nose or whatever, it'll be all right. You got to play through the pain, right?
That's it.
So, Coach, I want to kind of get you started here tonight. Just kind of talk to us a little bit about like how you got to LouCity. Like, give us that story. Like, what was the coach or the person that really helped push you to where you are today?
Yeah. So, I was assistant coach in the Real Salt Lake organization with the Monarchs the year I retired. John Hackworth got the job here about 6-7 months into my time at Real Salt Lake. He asked me to come join him here. For me, at a club like this and working under a man like him, it was a no-brainer. There in 2018. And I've been here since. It's one of the longest places I've ever been in my career, both playing and coaching. And it's been a joy. It really has. I'm super fortunate to be in this position at a club like this with the people that I get to work with every day. But it's certainly been, myself, my family have really taken on board, and, we love it here in Louisville.
Yeah. So, what has been some of the biggest highlights for you? Obviously, winning the championships and so forth. But what has been like the biggest thing that you've been most proud of?
Yeah, I think I would probably say the consistency. No matter how people may think it's not easy to do what this club has before my time and now consistently. And then I think when you look at the development that we've had of our young players and selling them, to clubs in Europe, helping them get to, reach their goals. I would say those are things that, really ultimately become proud of. But I think the biggest thing is the moments that you have with the group and the relationships that you build, competing for championships year after year. There's nothing better.
Indeed. Jon, you got a question here?
Coach Cruz, as you enter into what I consider your fourth season at helm of LouCity, you kind of come in having lost a decent amount of club legends, as a lot of people would say. How do you go about keeping that in this transition period, keeping the fans with you in that sort of sense?
Yeah, I think that's a totally a fair question. When we looked at obviously moving on from the players that we did, those are not easy decisions, right? And when you look at the group that we've brought in, we first and foremost wanted to make sure that we brought in people that we felt fit the culture. I think last year I probably made a few mistakes with regard to characters of some individuals that I brought in. But when I look at the group that we've brought in this year, I mean, the culture's been incredible up to this point. We've hammered home our values from day one, the type of people and the players that we want, and you're seeing it in preseason. I spoke after the game. I felt there was a little bit of a setback against Lexington. Watching the game back, and I'm sure you guys have already had your thoughts up to this point. Certainly, the first half was nowhere near as bad as I had made it out to be there at the end of the game. But there's still areas that we need to improve, and I think it's important. I've said it to the group a ton, where there wasn't a ton of adversity up to this point a month in. And it's really important to me that you see how close the group is really when adversity comes. And so tomorrow's going to be an important day when the guys get back in. Are we responding the way that I want us to respond? And, ultimately, I am really proud of the group that we've put together up to this point.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting way to dive into the season. Do you feel kind of any extra pressure or urgency this season to keep pushing for another championship?
No, I wouldn't say I do. Ultimately, listen, this is a place where we have high expectations of ourselves and people have high expectations of us, but I wouldn't want to be, anywhere else with lower expectations or pressure comes with it. And it's ultimately how do you deal with that? And I think playing for as long as I did, you're able to feel those moments quite a bit throughout your career, and it prepares you even better, for the moments that come as a manager. Um, those feelings, I won't forget the feelings that we had after losing to Tampa when we were up on the road in the conference final. Those are things that stick with me. But when you go through those moments and those experiences, you're better for it as a manager. Certainly, I learned a ton for myself and for the group and for the club just with that experience there. So I wouldn't tell you that I feel a sense of pressure because no one's going to put more pressure on me than I do myself, and I genuinely mean that because I want to succeed. I want the group to succeed. I want to do well for the community. Um, so I don't feel external pressure. It's more internal and how I choose to push myself.
Uh, with that you're creating your own pressure. How do you sometimes handle not essentially letting your own pressure you put on yourself overwhelm you? In particular, you said that the Lexington matchup was a bit of a disappointment in your kind of post match recap, but you guys have had like a stellar preseason up to that. You just beat a MLS side preparing for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So how do you sometimes, you want your players to not always feel the pressure? How do you sometimes make sure you're not feeling it?
No, I think it's a great question. Listen, for me, say pressure. I don't sit in the seat and feel it. I'm saying that I put more pressure on myself because I want the group to do well. I don't. It's not hindering, for lack of a better word. With regard to the group, against Lexington, it's about standards for us, and it's about understanding that when it's windy on a bouncy field against a difficult opponent that's difficult to break down, that you're showing up with the same mentality that you did against St. Louis on a perfect pitch with perfect weather in a beautiful stadium. Because the reality is that the game on that we played against Lexington is more like the environment we play in the U.S. So that really was where my frustration was I felt a sense after the game of complacency. Oh, we're playing Lexington. Oh, we're at Thurman. Oh, I want to nip that in the butt right away, and it's the first time we've had an environment like that this preseason. Now, in hindsight, when I go back and I've watched the video, Lexington had one chance in the first half. Cam's chance when he gets in over the top, right? We hounded the goal in the first half. We didn't execute. So that was poor. Second half, Lexington brought it. I would say to you, I felt they were the better team in the second half, watching all of that back. But I felt the mentality from our group in the second half was different than the first. In the first half, we were all over them, high pressure, good with the ball for the most part. And the second half, we didn't see it enough. And so it's not getting into the players because I'm frustrated. It's I want them to understand standard. We're going to hold ourselves to this standard every day, no matter the environment. In Detroit on a terrible atmosphere when it's windy and it's rainy, you got to be able to do it there, just like you can at home at Lynn Family. By the way,
Yeah,
to be.
Oh no, hold on.
I was about to say you're preparing yourself for a bad matchup.
No, I will say that is the worst stadium I've ever seen. I don't know what the field is like. I've never been there, but it looks terrible on camera. They need to be playing at Ford Field. We need to get some investment in that team. Detroit City deserves a better home than that little place they call a stadium now. And I chose my words very carefully.
I think that's fair. I mean, the atmosphere is pretty incredible. Like
It seems
the
exciting.
fans, like the atmosphere and all those things, But like in our league, as you guys know, you have to be able to play in those environments, in those type of fields, to win a championship. And every game in the regular season matters because ultimately it's the difference between going to San Antonio for a USL final, going to Charleston for a conference final, right? So this is why I say it's Thurman, windy, bumpy field. I don't care. We have to show up,
So how do you work sorry, John, how do you work with the team on that? Like, is there any magic sauce that you have for, other coaches out there to kind of help navigate through those kind of situations?
I think you emphasize you don't fabricate anything with them. You make it clear what we're going to be going into. So, when you go to Detroit, every year that I've been there, including when we had to play them in Open Cup and we beat them in penalties, you talk about with the group that it's not about football on the night. It's about the bite and the demeanor and the fight that you have for one another, right? And not giving the opponent opportunities, making sure they're earned. But it's a different game there than it is at Lynn Family, and you have to build your roster to be able to deal with those type of games, And again, I use Detroit as an example because I feel that atmosphere for players that haven't played in the USL is unique, and so the preparation going into that week is very different than the preparation going into playing them at home. That's just the reality, And so I think the biggest thing for me as a coach is making it clear to the group that you have to be able to win games in different ways. Of course, I want to play high pressure, good football with the ball. But there are going to be games where I want a group that is just willing and able to fight because the surface or whatever it might be makes it a little bit more difficult to build the way that we want to build, for example.
How do you do that for two new teams in the Eastern Conference? One that you guys have kind of played before back when North Carolina was up in the championship, but then a completely new team in Rhode Island.
Yeah, first when you start to scout them, right? I think that becomes important. Looking at the environment that we're going to be in. North Carolina, that's one of my favorite places to go because it's a very big field. It's a good grass field. So as far as change of style of play, it doesn't happen much going there. Rhode Island's completely new to me, as I'm sure it is everybody else. So I'm interested to see and hear from colleagues around the league when they go there. How is the field, right? What type of environment are we going into? So you have conversations with, specifically maybe I have a friend that's a manager in the West, right? So we're not really head to head as far as playoff spots and table. So, they go to Rhode Island, give them a shout and ask them, what was it like? What was the hotel like? What was the travel like? What was the food like? And you try to get a gauge of those things before you head into there.
Coach, you mentioned earlier, you've got some new players, but you've also got some of the core still there. How do you work to integrate the new talent with the core players that you've had for a couple of seasons now?
Yeah, a lot of conversations on culture, a lot of exercises, and let's call it team building meetings to make it clear on where the new players are at as far as what this club is. So the first day, I gave everybody a history lesson on Louisville City, not just for the new players, but also the returning players. More importantly, how we got to be in this beautiful facility with that beautiful stadium. You know, it doesn't just pop up out of thin air, right? It starts there, and then it's a lot of team building events. Like I said, a lot of spending time with one another, conversations about giving them different roommates. So a returning player with a new player when we went on the road to Tucson for 12 days, making it clear that I want to know something meaningful of each individual because they're having real discussions in their hotel rooms and not just staring at their phone and, you know, call it not having meaningful relationships and conversations. And those are things that are really important to me, but also they're things that I feel I've grown in making sure I'm putting an emphasis on that this year specifically because it was such a big turnover.
With that like team bonding emphasis you've placed, I noticed in some of the photos that came out of St. Louis City that Kyle Adams was wearing the armband.
Yep.
Like, who has kind of come up as your kind of newer leadership group now that those like legends have departed and there has to be like these new faces?
Yeah, I think it's been really impressive. So we've had that discussion with, I had a discussion with all of the returning players that say we're in that leadership group last year. I had that with them at the beginning of the season to let them know that I'm changing how this is going to look and how I want it to look going into this year. And I've challenged all of them, um, to take a role and find out the type of leaders that they want to be. Up to this point, everybody is clear that there will be a leadership group, but nobody is clear on who that group is going to be. And my reasoning for that is I'm continuing to analyze, I'm continuing to watch, I'm continuing to see how the group responds to one another. Against St. Louis, I gave the armband to Brian in one half and in 160 minutes and Kyle in another 60 minutes. I think they've done a really good job up to this point. But I haven't made any decisions, partly because for me, I know it's a very big one. This club has had the same captain for a very long time. And part of the reason I think the group has come together so well with a lot of different leaders is because I haven't gone, hey, and you're the group. Everybody else, you know, give us what you can, but you're not, in the group. And I think because I haven't done that, it's put us in a really good spot from a growth standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to think about, right? Like with the Piccolo departing and Lancaster going over to Lexington, like there is a lot of leadership that you all have had to turn over. Um, how would you rate this roster on a scale of like 1 to 10 compared to some of your other teams that you've had under your tenure?
I think it's a little bit too early to tell because I want to see how this roster responds when a result doesn't go our way, right? Like I want to see, but as far as quality, technical quality, people, it's coming together in a way that we're really really proud of, and I'm excited about that. Um, but I think time will tell for sure. Uh, but I mean, there's not one player that I've brought in this year. Let's call it a new player that I'm not very very high on and very happy about from an addition standpoint. Not one of them.
Jim, if you want to go.
Sure. Well, I was just going to kind of follow up on that same kind of thinking there. You know, with this changeover in leadership, how does the result yesterday? You called it a kind of a setback. I believe that's what the press release said.
Yep.
How are you looking to the team to respond in a way that you can use later down the season? Because I want to be a little critical here for a second, Coach.
Yeah.
Last season, there seemed to be times when I don't know if the roster just kind of got away from you or the locker room was starting to split or something. But from my untrained eye, let me put it that way, it seemed like there was something more happening. How do you take what happened yesterday in this entire preseason and apply that to the regular season to not let that happen again?
Yeah, so let me kind of address both things. So the first one, this is a very different group from a let's call it cultural and closeness standpoint than the group that we had last year up to this point already. But what I'm
I love
interested,
hearing that.
yeah, but what I am interested to see, as I said, is how close are they when the adversity comes? Now,
Mm-hmm.
I brought them in after the game against Lexington. We had a meeting in the locker room, and I'm looking at seeing, who is the voice, who is speaking up from them, and all those things. That's a piece of it, right? When we go back to last year, I think one of the biggest issues was I was really struggling to figure out who our best midfield three was, because
Mm-hmm.
we'd have a good game, then a shit game, bad individual performances, it was all over the place. The consistency was not there. Now, more importantly, and part of the reason I've uh, gone about preseason the way I have this year with the messaging and the values and the leadership and all those things was it was so obvious the amount of times last year we were making excuses. It's like, oh, Birmingham, it's 100 degrees on turf, it's a day game. I don't care. And when you start talking about it that way, you're already mentally in your own head about it. That
You've already
those are
lost.
examples. Yeah, those are examples of where I felt we weren't strong enough as a group, you know? Um, and ultimately, listen, I think you guys have probably seen I don't, especially publicly, I look at myself first. I don't go out there and blast the group. I don't go out there. I'll address it with them in there, right? In the locker room. But I'm not out there saying, player X, not good enough, absolute. I'm always like, tactics probably needed to be a bit better. Lineup needed to be different. Not because, not because, um, not for any reason other than ultimately I'm responsible for it. So I don't place blame. I don't. That's not how I manage. My hope is that that builds trust,
Mm-hmm.
between players and myself. And I have a lot of individual meetings because my players know they can come in at any time to have a conversation. I say to them the same thing I would say to you, which is you may not like what I have to say, but you'll know it's the truth. I'm not in the business of blowing smoke or like telling you what you want to hear, right? I'm in the business of trying to make you better individually and collectively. So, there were some things last year I was really unhappy about. I think when you look at how we performed there in the playoffs and the bite that we had, I mean, I think we put ourselves in a position to lift the trophy again. And
Yeah.
then when you look at, I think the tenure over, my time here, I'm really proud of, um, you know, the amount of games that we've won and all those things. And last year was a setback for sure, but I learned from it. I don't feel sorry for myself. I make sure that I'm doing the best I can to prepare the group going into this year.
Do you feel like this team does have that championship mentality and that they are ready to push through everything that we've kind of talked about and make it back to that level?
I would say they in the month that I've been with them, they haven't given me a reason to feel like they don't. Even like I said yesterday, I wasn't obviously happy, but when I watched the game back, I'm cognizant. I am not the guy that um, goes after that, says to the group, not good enough, not good enough after the game. If I watch it back and it was good enough, I don't double down on Tuesday.
Right.
I'm like, listen, I may have got the first half wrong. I still feel pretty strongly about the second half. But that's just kind of how I operate. Again, they're all going to watch the game. They're going to see what it looks like, you know?
Yeah, of course. And it's one of those things like when you're watching the film back, like what are you taking from it? Are you taking the lessons that, this is where I need to improve, or are you just kind of watching and be like, oh, that guy, he's got to make that tackle next time,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Let's go for it, John.
Coach Cruz, to kind of get semi off topic, but it's a little relevant to like the soccer landscape right now. What is your thoughts on kind of the whole Open Cup saga that's kind of shaking out right now? A little before we went on, a source report came out through ESPN that like MLS is like half participating possibly in the cup.
Just insane.
I was curious of like your thoughts on just kind of the whole thing and possibly preparing your side, which right now is favored to be one of the better teams in the USL Championship, for a chance at winning the most prestigious trophy in America.
Yeah, how would I say this? I think it's super frustrating to see how it's played out. No question. I think everybody should be in it. I think the rules are pretty clear. It also, ultimately, obviously, I'll state it's not a Danny decision. It's above me, right? But ultimately, I think the Open Cup, I played in it in 2009 all the way through. I've coached in it now. It's an amazing tournament with so much history, and I think everybody should be in it. I think the MLS
unequivocally. I will say it. Everybody should be in it.
Yeah,
there ain't no think.
Yeah, the first teams should be playing. We are excited about it. I look at what happened last year, and it was incredible to watch. Even after, we played at Cincy, and I was really proud of the performance. I thought we were the better team on the day, but we lost. But I was into it the rest of the time. I was watching SAC. I was following it. I was hoping USL teams kept doing well. So I would say I'm pretty gutted to see how it's played out up to this point. I didn't see the article that you're talking about, so I'm not really up to speed on what it's going to look like. But
yeah,
I do wish
that just dropped like an hour ago. So just doing my little pre-prep for the show.
Yeah.
Well, Coach, we'll get you out of here on this. What is the biggest challenge you think this team is going to face this year, and how can the supporters get into Lynn Family Stadium to help support the team again?
That's a good question. I think the biggest challenge for the group will be, especially I would say for the guys that are returning, including the staff, responding when something doesn't go the way that we want it to go, being honest about the performance, and collectively coming together. And instead of, as happened last year, lost a game, lost another game, making sure that
not letting it snowball.
Yeah, exactly. And responding the right way, because we do have a lot of quality. There's no question about that. I have a group that I'm very excited to come to work with every single day, and they have shown some real quality against good opponents. But how we respond is going to be most important, and I'm confident that I have a group that is going to respond the way that we want them to respond and expect them to, with our values and our culture. But we do have a lot of quality. I'm really excited about individuals and the group. As far as our support, I mean, year after year, it never ceases to amaze me. When I stand on the sideline, people, it would be difficult for people to understand, I think. But when I'm on the sideline, I've been here, as you said, 6 years, 2018 to now. I feel a huge sense of pride just being on the sideline for a game with our fans and our community. My son, he loves nothing more than running on the field after the game, win or lose, and fans will talk to me about it because they know that's mine and Santi's thing, and my point in telling you that is continuing to show up, knowing that you're going to have a manager and a group that is going to do everything they can to get us back to lifting something and celebrating together.
Absolutely. Coach Cruz, we really appreciate you being on and hanging out with us tonight. Hope you get over it and you feel a little bit better. And we had that third star this year. Okay, let's get
That's
it
it.
done.
That's it. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
No problem, Coach. John, wow, that was a really good interview.
Yeah, that went well. He's helps that he's like a talker.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that makes our job
He
easier
doesn't
as well.
just like he doesn't just like answer the question. He like goes this whole breakdown into the which is that's like how I talk. So it's easier to have a conversation interview that way.
Yeah, and I liked how honest he was, and how transparent he is about like when things aren't going good. He's looking at himself. He gets it. He's not someone who's going to be pointing the finger at the players and being like, you, and you, y'all are trash. That's why we lost." He like he said, he's going to take it on himself. And I think if you're looking for an organizational leader, that's exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Especially, I think it helps with him being there for so long.
Yep.
And all that thing, like he's been there since 2018. He's entering technically his third head coaching year, but it's his fourth if you count interim, which is I don't get why they don't do that, but
It's kind of like a weird little asterisk.
yeah, he's been there, and he's been there since he's like at the helm since they've been in Lynn, so I think that's a big deal.
Absolutely. And with so much roster turnover, like I appreciate that he said, like he's still looking for those people to wear the armband, and I think that's going to be something as fans of LouCity this year that we're going to see multiple people wearing it. But it will be like a small core. It's not going to be like 12 different people throughout the year.
I don't necessarily think that was that. I think that's the fact of he knows players will probably see this or hear this possibly. It's a thing of like nothing's set in stone yet. Like
Right.
there's probably things like Owen B and Adams wearing it against St. Louis. There was no captaincy that I remember seeing in the Lexington game, but it was a matter of it's not set in stone yet. I'm not going to state it here to where maybe whoever is third or fourth guy goes like, oh, well, it's those two guys. I might as well stop trying to be captain or whatever type deal. It's that type of thing of there's no closed door yet.
Yeah, and before we dive fully into the breakdown of what we saw yesterday, any other thoughts on the interview, John?
No, I'm all good.
Yeah, so we'll kind of pivot and exactly dive into what we were just talking about there. Like I thought it was interesting yesterday hearing because we were literally on the pitch, like we were right behind. I mean, gosh, what 5 yards off the pitch? Like we were right there.
For those that don't know, the game was played at a park, a legit park. Like you leave the parking lot and turn right, there was a play structure.
And the river was right there.
Yeah. There was floodlights, obviously, but this field was very much not flat. It was a grass field full of dead grass.
Mm-hmm.
I found it very curious that they played on that one and not the one behind them. Because the one behind
which looked nicer. Yeah.
A grass pitch, that type of deal. The only way you could tell it was a LouCity thing is there was a sign on the fences that said a singular sign, and then they brought their corner flags with the emblems on it. There was no some people were like, why aren't they streaming the game? I was like, there was nowhere to stream.
No. And it was at what is it? Thurman Hutchins Park.
Yeah.
For the Louisville native.
The video he's referring to is they literally had a dude putting a drone up in the air.
Which was crazy because I really thought at one point he was just going to mow the yard with that drone.
Yeah. And they played 2 45-minute halves and a 15-minute period after that. It was supposed to be 30, but I guess they were they cut it down for some reason. It was a mix. From what I recall, the 2 45-minute halves were mixes of starters and reserves.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
like Isaac Kano and Jansen Wilson,
Yep.
they both played against each other in the first half, like same side of the field and everything. Those are two young guys for both teams, but we also saw the likes of you know all three keepers for Lexington. We only saw two for
For Lou.
Lou. We didn't see Loss, or however you say his name. Their new guy from Austin. Um, but ONB played the first half for Lou. Adams played the second half. It was very much a mix. There's the 15-minute period was heavy academy kids, a lot, and some
I
younger
think it
kids.
was pretty much only academy kids at that point. Like maybe
I
some
don't
lower
think
end roster guys, but
that, yeah, because like Jackson was playing then too, so it was like young guys. Anthony Patty for Lexington was playing then too, so like the younger end guys on teams and academy players, as well as Lexington's two trialists, they were out there. Um, Actually, like an academy kid nearly broke the level. Uh,
Mhm.
there was a lot of those chances in the match. Lou had one in the first half where Knight saved it and it bounced off his glove, and I don't know who it was, but they put it just wide of the post, like full wide open net in front of them. Like they were like 3 feet from the net or something like that, and it was just wide of the post. So I think overall it's a good thing for both squads. You could raise the question. It was a little concerning for LouCity, but at the same time, I don't think it is um, type of deal. It's just what happens when you get back from you know Phoenix and then St. Louis, so where you're playing on a not perfect field.
Yeah, and
Happens.
Coach Cruz did a good job of addressing that. And just for like the audience, and especially like the folks, in Bowling Green, you'll really understand what I'm saying when I say this. Like, it felt like a UPSL match. Like, I posted that in like our Discord server that the three of us kind of talk in. Like, that's what it looked like. That's what it felt like.
It felt
There
like
would have been
a high
no way to
school
stream it.
tournament match, a middle school tournament match. Like no lie,
Middle
y'all,
school. I don't even think it felt like high school.
no lie, y'all. Lexington's new facility fields, granted
Yeah.
those are all turf,
Hmm.
was better, just overall better. Like this field had a curve to it.
It did. And the Golden Lions know all about going up to Elizabethtown and playing some of those games at the E Town Sports Park, where the field is literally like a mound, and you can see divots in there from like 15 years ago. Like it was not a great playing surface. So I appreciate Coach Cruz bringing that up, because that's just what the players are going to have to get used to. It's not going to be perfect conditions every match. There's a difference in playing at Lynn versus Indianapolis. We won't pick on Detroit any further, but like Indy, that place is not great either.
Yeah, and I don't think any USL pitch is that bad,
No,
personally.
I would be surprised. Let me say, I'd be very surprised.
But that it's good. It was good to see for both sides. Type of deal. We saw basically everyone besides some people who had injury
Hmm.
concerns. There was a few for Lex, few for City.
That is something I wanted to pull up. There was an injury for a player from Lexington. Did you have more on that? Okay, we'll keep that silent.
That
There was a
is
player that got injured.
a on the down low type deal, and I want to say that because some of this has come out with like how Lexington reported the match on socials versus how like LouCity did.
Yeah,
Um,
Lexington was very closed, right? And Lou was like, "Man, we don't care."
yeah, and I think that's what people are forgetting is that we are under the first year of Powell. So if like when we got approached by Emily, who's the Lexington's marketing director. She was very, here's a little peek behind the curtain type things. She's like, yeah, you can kind of live tweet at the start. She's like, you can kind of live tweet, but they don't want anything about
No
formation,
details.
no details. Even if goal scorer or like wait till we say it or wait to like do a decent delay type deal. They were even I believe I called something like don't say anything about time, which I couldn't.
Yeah, there was no clock.
There was no
I guess
clock.
we
Like,
could have kept our own time, but
yeah, I think that's what the coaches were doing, but
yeah.
there was no clock. But to people's points, it's like I can understand how that's frustrating, but Powell is trying to use the nuance, or not the nuance, the newness of him and of his squad as much to his advantage as possible. Where Coach Cruz, like, he's been there for 18 years. This is his going into his fourth season as a head coach. There's a lot of paper on him.
Yeah.
So, and even though they have a lot of roster turnover, there's still a good portion that's coming back. There's still probably going to be some starters in there and that type of deal. So it's not as critical information because they're like they can pull up a whole season or multiple seasons of Cruz ball, and there's probably like no coach is like really changing themselves that much in their whole careers in general.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to your point there, I think it was just that. I think he doesn't want Coach Powell for Lexington doesn't want a whole lot out there about who they like the trialists. Like John and I saw. Did we see both trialists or
We
just
saw
one?
both trialists.
Yeah.
In general, that's a thing at the lower leagues where you don't hear
Yeah.
anything, and you could
By the way,
debate.
they both looked pretty good, especially one of them. Trialist number one looked very good.
You could debate on if that's good or not to do. I see sides of like it helps protect the player in case nothing ever comes to fruition.
Right.
The clubs that way they can also be like their way of protecting the player in terms of negotiation contracts, that type of deal. But we also see other teams like we know Keziah Sterling from Tormenta last year is trialing with Pittsburgh right now because that keeps getting reported. So it's a hit and miss on each teams. I agree that teams need to be a little more transparent, but like you would take every advantage you could, and that's what Powell is doing right now. So I can understand it's frustrating, but if it helps us win games by not saying, "Oh, these are the guys playing," I'll take it.
Yeah, and yeah, we just kind of have to respect their wishes. But I can't for Lexington fans. Like if trialist number one does sign, he will be somebody that will play a decent amount and will add to the depth of the roster just based on what we saw yesterday. That's all I'll say.
Do you understand how deep he's a forward? Do you understand how deep our forward group is right now?
And I still think he can make an impact.
Okay. I don't know. From our interview with Coach Powell, I don't see them signing them just because he keeps giving me the vibes of like that the group is kind of solidified. So, but they could, if they're going good this trial, like they impress them, they could sign. They still have, at least by this low end count I've seen for USL rosters, they still have 2 spots. So,
Okay, I didn't realize that. Then yeah, that kind of makes me understand why you feel that way. I was still pretty impressed by him. I thought he did pretty good, but we'll just see. Now, the matchup that I unintentionally, I promise I wasn't meaning to do this. The matchup, especially in the first half that I was watching, was Wilson versus Cano. And I thought that was a really interesting comparison because it was surprising how similar they both were. But, where Jansen is going to get a chance on a championship roster, he's probably not going to start. He may get a couple of spot starts here and there, if they have 2 games in a week kind of a thing. But he'll probably just most likely be a sub for the most part. But Cano starting for Lex, I could easily see how much better and how much more developed he was since the end of last season. So I think that was a really interesting matchup to see uh, in that preseason game, and I'm really going to start comparing those two players throughout the year just to see which pathway seems to have been better suited for the players.
So Econo is going to be interesting because loans are always interesting because
Mm-hmm.
loans come with rules and stipulations. I don't know if like LouCity applied those or if like Econo has to start at least 3 games. He has to play so many minutes or so we want to see him in an appearance in so many matches. That sometimes is in place when a upper higher up league team sends a player down because they're sending the player down for a reason. They're wanting him to get minutes, that type of thing. It could also just be a straight up our forward group is a little crowded right now. Lexington's isn't as crowded, like in terms of people. Uh, go there and develop under, go be with Lancaster, go in that type of thing, go see what happens down there, sort of situation. It could just be both sides are saving money since Kano is from Dunbar, and they're
Right.
like, go stay with your family.
That would be quite the interesting turnabout if that was the agreement. Um, the only, there are other things that we can talk about in the match, but the only thing that I want to talk about was that there was no score. As we talked about with Coach Cruz and in our conversation here, both teams had their opportunities. Ownby had an opportunity in the first half but couldn't finish. Um, in the second half, Lexington seemed to have had the better of the attacking opportunities there. So it was quite interesting to see how. I'm hesitant to say it, but I will. Like Lou seemed a little lackluster, and Lex seemed to be able to bring it at times.
I definitely think it was like Coach Cruz said, it was the second half type deal, sort of thing. Like a lot of guys played in different roles, sort of thing. From the first half, from what I recall, Lexington was playing a more defensive way, more like a 4-man back line, versus in the second half, they were playing more of a 3-man back line. So I think it was Powell was playing like let's see, like OMB was up playing. I believe I saw Wilson Harris as well in that first half. So like it was very more LouCity's attack in the first half, more their first options of attack. So I think maybe a pre-conversation between the two coaches of like, hey, I'm going to mainly play my attacking group one half, or and my defensive group another half. If you want to play more your defensive guys, and we'll see how that goes, and that sort of thing is what I kind of got out of it.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that because the first half with Ownby and Wilson playing for Lou, then the second half Adams kind of anchoring the defense. I kind of got a little bit of that vibe from them. Um, so maybe it was a little bit of that, or maybe I think in our conversation we mentioned here that it was just trying to play some different people with other folks, just to trying to see who is the best chemistry and who you can put in and win to make a difference.
Yeah.
Overall, John, any other kind of final thoughts from yesterday's match before we continue with like our little bit of a preview here for LouCity?
No, you can go ahead.
Sure. So, LouCity fans, this is a very exciting season, right? The 10th season. You only get one of these ever in franchise history. So this season is going to be a jam-packed schedule. 34 games. First home game is March 23rd. It is going to be really a season that I'm excited for. To me, this team is a go deep and go into the playoffs and make a deep run or bust kind of season. I really think there's some pressure that will be on Coach Cruz, and I know he'll take that personally and that he will try and be the best coach that he can, and he will get his staff to be the best coaches they can. But after the last 2 years of being so close, but ending in such a heartbreaking way, I wonder if it happens again, what will ownership think? Will they look to, make some changes? Um, so John, just kind of want to get your reaction to that idea.
I don't. I think it would take a lot to get like what I would consider an ownership overreaction.
Because that is true. We're talking soccer. We're not talking the NFL.
Yeah, especially since the roster has had so much turnover. Yes, they've brought in some top tier guys. Ordonez, Alas, and all these this group. They brought in some good signings, but I think with that it comes a sort of type deal of let's see what happens, because they've also brought in some young guys as well. There's a good group of academy kids that had got signed to pro contracts, or at least academy contracts, where they are basically on the pro team. The weird USL Academy contracts. So I think it's a big. If it was like they finish 4th or 5th again, and they don't make the Eastern Conference final, like the streak finally breaks, and they're like, "All right, you're out, Cruz." I think that's a very much an overstep.
Agreed.
Like I understand it's your 10th season, but I don't feel like because of that you need to be like, we have to win. You have to win or you're out, Cruz. Like that just, I wouldn't want to come into that culture as a coach and be like, so you fired your arguably one of the best coaches in your history because he didn't continue a kind of crazy streak to begin with.
And I think that's important as fans for us to think about, right? Like, yes, this is a traditional powerhouse in the USL, but it's not something that we can expect every year. Like, no team wins a championship every year unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs. Apparently, they've won 2 out of 3 or whatever.
They won 3 in 6 years.
Yeah, that's just insane. And so we have to be careful, right, with that kind of a mindset. And do I think Coach Cruz would be on the hot seat if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals but lose again? Absolutely not. And that would be a massive overreaction to do something like that. But I do think it's fair that with the disappointing endings to the last 2 seasons, if they flame out, they're the 8th seed or something, and they get knocked out in the first round, then I think there could be some conversations. And if they don't make it, oof, okay, now we really need to examine this roster and see what went wrong.
It'd be a miracle if they don't make it.
Of course.
Because
it would be a nightmare. It wouldn't be a miracle.
No, it'd be a miracle if they don't make it, because this roster is too talented to not make playoffs in the East.
Yeah.
If you look at the other Eastern Conference teams, this roster is too good. Like John Morrissey with USL Tactics picked LouCity to go first in the Eastern Conference, that type of thing. Like, to go from that to 9th is kind of shocking. Like, they are, in my opinion, they are better than Indy. They're like, Detroit has had some upgrades, but they're not all the way there. Hartford has had some upgrades, but they're not there yet.
Well, they were terrible to begin with, so
yeah, they are. There are 2 new dogs who have come in who are looking good, but like Pittsburgh has gotten real gutted.
Yeah, but Rhode Island, they're not going to compete. North Carolina has still got a USL 1 roster.
Have you seen who Rhode Island has signed?
No. Who is on the Rhode Island roster that could make LouCity shake?
I believe the reigning player of the year.
Okay, it's one guy. Who else has Rhode Island signed
I'm
that could
just
make?
saying they've signed a lot of guys that are
And we
top quality.
signed the
They've
the
been
best
spending.
defensive player.
No, I'm not saying LouCity chick. Well, I'm saying Rhode Island in terms of the rest of the East
Yeah,
are going to be competitive. It could be where their games are competitive. I still think LouCity's a step above. Like as of right now, LouCity, in my opinion, looking at the roster, is the best in the East. I think the questions come when you compare them to like Sacramento out in the West,
yeah.
teams out west, are where who's better comes to mind. So that, with that being said, it'd be a true miracle, like of the squad completely falling apart for them to not make the playoffs. Like a squad, like players truly playing under their like average ability. I feel.
I'll agree with that. I do think Charleston and Tampa will have something to say with who is the Eastern Conference champion by the end of the year. A little bit of Memphis as well from some of the stuff I've been seeing that they've gotten a little bit better. But, I do agree. I think that it's lose to lose in the East. And I really do think that what we saw yesterday I came in and I changed some of my stuff on my article that I'm going to release later this week. I changed some stuff because I was a little bit more down on it. And I thought, yeah, maybe they'll make it to the East, but won't win it or something like that. But the culture that I saw yesterday, like literally, you've got players in a preseason game that are trying to pick each other up and trying to get a game to be as competitive as possible, considering everything that was going on, playing on a terrible field, et cetera, et cetera. That to me speaks highly of this roster and the team that they have built. And I do think that this is the year that we get that third star on our crest and that we raise another banner at the start of next season. So I'm feeling bold to say that they will not have much, if any, competition in the East. I agree with John's idea that, Sacramento, yeah, that's going to be a challenge. I think Phoenix out west also could be a sneaky big opponent for them, but
Phoenix is interesting.
they are.
And this is what I tell people a lot. With them, because everyone's like, "Well, Phoenix are the reigning champs. Phoenix were the 6th seed, and they are literally. If you look at their run last year, I believe the USL Championship tweeted something recently about this. They like the Cardiac Kids is literally who they were. They were multiple points in all their 4 playoff games, but they were down 1 or 2 goals and they won. They I think in the final they were down 1-0 to Charleston in the 89th minute. Like it's like I'm 90% sure the league tweeted out something recently about it. But with that is how much can you rely on luck? Because I'm sorry,
Right.
4 games like that is a bit of luck. Yes, it's skill and it's having that drive, but it's a bit of luck. How and like LouCity, how much can they rely on luck? Yes, they beat they beat Memphis, thankfully due to a just wide penalty, and then they rolled Detroit. But what happens if Detroit doesn't beat Pittsburgh last year?
Right. If you flip that result, if
Do they
that
still
game is
make the
at
final?
Pittsburgh,
Do you
because it would
still
have been
make?
at Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Do you still make the Eastern Conference final in that case? So I think it's all the league, and Coach Powell even touched on this. Like he cares more about the league. I think everyone cares more about the league because the playoffs are a crapshoot.
Right.
So I think we need to see where they end up in the league, and that's where you really judge a team.
Absolutely. So, John, what is your final prediction for how LouCity will do this year?
I'm gonna say a top 5 team in all of USL. Top in the East.
That's interesting. You think they could be at worst top 5? Wow. Because I'm thinking higher than that. I'm thinking at worst they're going to finish in third overall, and I think they still have the better roster in the East.
Well, like you said, there's Tampa, Charleston, and Lou in the East. So that's 3 teams. Sacramento, that's 4. So like,
yep. And then
you know,
Phoenix or Memphis or somebody else could jump in that conversation too.
Tulsa's moved out west
Tulsa.
now. New Mexico, San Antonio has retooled a lot. So I think it's just a matter of like there's the void of San Diego's gone. Vegas is actually spending money and like picking up good players now with their new ownership group and all that type stuff. So top 5 is still good. Like you're a top 5 team in the entire league. I think that's like their low end type stuff. Like no worst, in my opinion, than the 5th best team in the championship.
Well, and I'm going to be even, like I said a few minutes ago, I'm going to continue with my bold stance. I think they've got the talent. I think they've got the coaching. I think they've got the drive this year to get it done. I will go on record February 19th that come late October, November for the championship game, we will see LouCity hoisting that trophy yet again. But John, I do, before we get out of here, I kind of briefly want to talk about the Open Cup news. Now, I'm going to be very honest. I saw the ESPN update, but I have not got to dive into it. So walk me and the audience kind of through what's been going on.
So it's hard to say really exactly what's been going on because one, to all people, all this stuff is just rumors that have come out. Nothing has been like set in stone. Nothing was locked in stone. It's just a classic like Twitter fallout type deal. But it came out recently over the weekend that I believe this is from 2 weekends ago. Jeff Ruder stated that like the MLS and the U.S. Soccer have been in talks daily since U.S. Soccer's denial of MLS's request, even though it wasn't a request, to play MLS next teams in the Open Cup to try to figure out a solution. And so since then, multiple things got proposed. One of them was all MLS teams except for the ones that play in the CONCACAF Champions League, which would have meant like the Dynamo, who are the reigning Open Cup champs, can't be in it or wouldn't be in it. There was one that's like, okay, each team gets a say on either sending the first team or sending the next pro team. And then there was one where it was like just do expanded rosters, and that's what everyone just wants you to do. Just expand your rosters.
Right. Just keep the team, but expand the roster.
But it's come out recently in this ESPN thing by Peter Calci. I don't know how to say his name. That according to a source for him, they've semi-reached an agreement where MLS will participate, but it's not all MLS teams. And I've kind of said this on my Twitter type thing of like, because there was even something earlier today that was like, the U.S. Soccer was talking about canceling the tournament entirely if MLS like fully backed out.
That would just be so heartbreaking.
Like here's the thing. I want MLS in the Open Cup, but I want the Open Cup to happen more than I want MLS in it. So it's like I would rather no MLS and Open Cup than try to figure out something or just cancel it. I'm okay. I don't like it, but I'm okay if the tournament happens and there are some MLS teams in it. Because I think this is because, according to reports, CONCACAF stepped in and told MLS that, like, hey, if you don't participate in the Cup, you don't get that CONCACAF Champions League spot from it. Like, we're not, like, you don't, if one of your teams wins it and you're not fully participating, I don't know fully all the details yet, you're not getting that Champions League spot. So we'll see what happens that way.
And I hate that it, excuse me, that it had to come to that for them to kind of realize, like, okay, I guess we'll let some of the teams in, whatever the final agreement is going to be. But like to me, this is just another attempt by the MLS to completely break away from U.S. soccer and run their own pyramid and make their own tournaments and just collect all the money.
I don't
And that's a real shame.
I don't think it's attempt by them. I think it's the fact that U.S. Soccer did not renew a deal with some.
Yeah.
So, like, here's the thing. I've said this to people multiple times. It is very interesting that this has all happened a year after the SUM agreement, or SUM, which is Soccer United Media or Marketing. Um, After their whole like 20, it was like 17, 20-year run of controlling the Open Cup,
Mm-hmm.
it's like distribution and all that type stuff has come. It's like 1 year after that, it's when the MLS is like, oh, we don't like the Open Cup. What I don't like in this whole fiasco is we have not heard a sound out of the MLSPA.
Nope. Not one
Nothing.
word.
Because everyone keeps citing this thing the president said back in like June. And I was like, that's a whole different world than what post type thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally like 10 or no, 8 months from that. Like the whole thing has changed and we need to hear something from them.
Yeah, because all the former players have mentioned that they've like that's how they made their debuts and that type of stuff. And that's the thing. I got into someone who was like, "Why does it matter?" Because I was like, "I don't care if the reserves play. Like we lower league fans don't care if you MLS teams play the reserves, but we want to play
Right.
the MLS team, not MLS next team." He's like, "Why does that matter?"
Mm-hmm.
And to comment on something later is like, oh, the League's Cup's more successful. I'd rather play a tournament with Club America or Memphis 901. I was like, okay, would you rather play Club America 2 or Memphis 901? He's like, well, I was like, no, you that's the thing. My thing. And here's the thing. I've said it to people. Union Omaha, it's in their history books that they beat Chicago Fire and Minnesota United. That's
Yeah.
officially that those two MLS teams lost to a D3 squad in a tournament.
Yep.
That's official.
Yep.
Knowing how the MLS operates or how all these things, they would be able to say is if they put next pro teams in, it's like, well, you didn't actually beat the first division side because you didn't. But
Which is agreeable, right?
Yeah.
But like,
but that's
at
how
least you can still say the score says Chicago Fire 0, Union Omaha
yeah,
1. I don't remember the score,
but like that's what I've had to tell people. It's like it's a whole thing. It literally happens in every other country. They don't send their
mm-hmm.
B teams. They just bring them all up. Those players get official caps for those teams. Like they have officially played for the first team. So I don't get all these things. And I think it comes down to people. If you are an MLS fan, it is okay to be it. And I think this is in general for sports in America. We need to get to this mindset of club over league where you support your team before your league. So if you're arguing, well, this is what's best for the league, I was like, is it best for the league or is it the best for your team?
That's an interesting thought. And it's interesting, right? Because I think you're exactly right that we do tend to gravitate towards, oh, well, you know, if that's what the MLS wants, that's what we'll get. That just seems so backwards, right? Like I would think people would be like, no, I want to see, if you're a Revolution fan, just out of randomness, then you would want to see Revolution going for every opportunity to win any kind of cup and any kind of a competition. Heck, even with Inter Miami, like I was really excited to see them push towards the League's Cup and push towards the Open Cup and fall short, but still push towards the MLS playoffs. Like I don't understand as a fan why you wouldn't want to see your team compete. And even if it is a B team or it's the academy team that they've brought up, for Nashville, if they basically bring up the Huntsville roster to play in the game, so be it. Those are still your boys in gold.
Yeah,
Go support them.
and like that's a good case. FC Dallas, North Texas is a good case.
Yeah,
A lot of these teams are
we talked
not
about that yesterday.
the difference of a like little 2 on the badge. Some of these teams are fully different
Yeah.
branding and identity. You can't say, well, what's the difference? Well, there's clearly a difference between Nashville SC and Huntsville City.
Yeah. Now, I wish the teams did have the opportunity to come into the tournament and play. I do. No, I do, because I like to see the different regionality, and I would love to see the different teams.
You know why they wouldn't? Because you're allowed to drop players down to MLS or MLS Next Pro. It's like not just development. So you know what I could fully see happening? Say Nashville gets knocked out, but Huntsville moves on.
They just drop Zimmerman and everybody down.
Yeah, flip. Especially if they like Huntsville, they keep Huntsville in, but Huntsville like makes a run to the quarterfinal. Wherever that thing was like, oh, we have a legit shot at this. Flip the whole roster.
But think how magical that would be for folks in Huntsville.
Wouldn't be magical, because it would get.
You can't tell me
it would get robbed from them. If you take
by who?
By Nashville. If you take Sacramento's run where they make the final, right? They make the Open Cup final in 2022. If you take that, and when they hit the quarterfinal, they get told by San Jose, oh, the entire San Jose Quakes roster is now going to play in all these games, just wearing your colors. That is completely different. That is like your players, like this, and this is the thing I don't understand. Supporting the Next Pro teams per se, like in Huntsville or that type of thing. We don't know how well they are supported either. They don't release attendance numbers. Unlike like Chattanooga and Carolina Core are supposed to be independent teams, and they're fully independent. Those are different. I don't understand like fully being a fan or supporting a team that is a developmental team that is literally just a place where people get dropped down to either develop, rehab, that sort of thing.
It's the baseball model, right? Like, I mean, look here in Bowling Green, Kentucky, right? Like they're the I don't know, the blah 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 AARP team for the they're the Hot Rods. I know that, John. I was trying to remember their classification. They're the AARP team for Tampa Bay Devil Rays, right? So like they're still connected, but you couldn't tell a Bowling Green Hot Rods fan that if they got a chance to go play in Yankee Stadium and beat the Yankees, that it wouldn't mean something, even if they had a Tampa Bay roster. Like, it would still mean something to this community. And now I'm going to contradict myself. That's something that does bother me about like Huntsville or, North Texas. Those communities don't get those same opportunities to have a team make a run, because now if there's an MLS Next Pro team, the USL's not going to Huntsville, right? Like maybe for like a USL 2 team at best. But like it does drive down competition in that perspective.
I could say that, but I could also see like if they were even allowed, in the sense of MLS teams get to pick. I could also see that being said of like if Nashville decides to take it, they can literally go to Huntsville and it's like, thank you for getting us to the quarterfinals. Nashville SC will now take from here now. And it will be
now if they completely flipped the team, like the team name and everything, that would tick me off.
I could see that happening. Because then the thing happens like with draws. Like what happens if both Nashville and Huntsville make a run? What happens when they face
as an organization? You got to figure it out.
They face each other. Like how
you got to figure.
How does that look to an organization?
It looks like money, because whoever's hosting it's making money. So I don't understand. I don't understand where the problem is.
Okay, you're the owner of the Rays in this case. You bring your single A team here and they spack your major league team around. How does that look for you? How does that look for the optics of Nashville SC?
All right, I get that. But, in any sport, it's a one-off, right? Like, any team can beat anybody. Then the whole Hoosiers thing, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you'll figure it out. Like, anybody can win. It's just one of those things. Like, if you get beat, you get beat, and you realize that there are players that maybe you should bring up and that you give chances to. Then who knows? Then give Nashville a chance to push even further in the West. Yeah, they're still in the West. That's weird. Or if you're in Cincinnati, and I don't know who their agreements are with, but if they were to all of a sudden start working with like Valhalla up there in Dayton area, that would be something big. Where if those two teams play each other, and Valhalla was to win, they don't have a huge following, but like that would still be huge to see them to pull off that kind of an upset.
True. I don't know. We'll just see. The thing is, some people have said this. They've said this is like the death nail to the cup. This is a death nail to the cup and that type of stuff. And I was like, the cup has survived. It survived through a lot of sense. So I think it will continue to survive, even if it's in this weird form.
Yeah, sorry, we got a little message here, and I'm trying to respond. Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's a death nail in the Open Cup with or without the MLS teams. I think USL Championship clubs and USL League One clubs plus the amateur teams can really put on a show, and I would really love to see that exposure. Like Coach Cruz said, if they get an opportunity, they're going for it. And how fun would it be to raise a banner for that in Louisville? I think that'd be a lot of fun. Or in Lexington, if they can pull off some upsets and make it all the way. That would be very impressive. Your first championship.
Well, maybe. It would depend on when it's played, because it might be after we win the in-season cup. So it'd be our second one.
Would it be?
I don't.
Oh,
the in-season cup.
On, what would that timing look
the
like?
In-season cup semis, I believe, is in the middle of September, if I recall correctly, because it's in like middle of September, 2 or 3 or like 6 more weeks, then USL playoffs. It'll be a part of our quad. So,
yeah, one of the 4. Yeah, and to continue the conversation about the Open Cup and stuff like that, Justin Blair, if you want to come and join the show, please let us know. Just hit us up, give us a message on Twitter. Send me a DM. We'd be more than happy. I've got some open dates still, and we would love to have this conversation. And maybe by the time we do get you booked, we'll have some more information. But yeah, Justin, come on. We'd love to have you on the show. That would be awesome. But John, any kind of final thoughts on tonight's episode? Anything else still burning that you want to talk about?
No, I'm all good right now, in all honesty.
All right. So, folks, great show tonight with Coach Cruz. We will be back on Wednesday night again this week. This time we will have Coach Bev from Racing Louisville on the show. So make sure that you send us all of your questions that you want to get answered about Racing Louisville, as we will have our full Racing Louisville season preview that will be released on Wednesday, along with the full interview with Coach Bev and the full show talking about it that night. But with all that out of the way, make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms at BG Soccercast. Our Twitter, our Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of those fun places. As well as make sure you're listening to us on all of our podcasting platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple. We appreciate all the listens on all of those platforms. Just throw it on in the background while you're cleaning, or do whatever you do while you're driving, and we appreciate all the support. We've always got the little QR code that sits over my shoulder here. If you want to support the show financially, you can just scan the QR code. It takes you to our Buy Us Coffee account, and every dollar goes to support the show. But John, with all that out of the way, I'm Jimmy. That's John, and we will see you